Secretary Buttigieg, thanks for being with us. I want to get to the negotiations on infrastructure in a moment, but first, it's Memorial Day weekend. 37 million Americans are expected to travel this weekend. Masks are still required on airplanes and public transportation, despite new CDC guidance that vaccinated individuals are safe and do not need to wear masks indoors or outdoors. The Biden administration says you will always follow the science. What science is there that says that a fully vaccinated person needs to wear a mask on a plane or a train or a bus?
So the public health guidance is a little bit different for situations like planes and trains. Part of it has to do with the unique conditions of the physical space. Part of it has to do with the conditions of it being a workplace and folks who really don't have a choice about being there the way it is in some other cases. Of course, these rules and regulations and these bodies of guidance always evolve with the science. But the bottom line is we have a set of rules in place to keep people safe. And I really hope that travelers will respect flight attendants, bus operators, workers, anybody who is simply doing their job to keep people safe. You think about what people who work in travel and transportation, think about what they've been through over the course of the last year with their jobs in doubt and with a lot of challenges on the job. And with a record number, at least in recent months, traveling this weekend, let's do it in a way we can be proud of and show respect for all of those workers who are getting us to where we need to be.
Let's turn to infrastructure negotiations just to catch everyone up. President Biden started at $2.3 trillion in his proposal. Republicans started at about $600 billion. Now President Biden has gone down to $1.7 trillion. Republicans say they're at nearly $1 trillion over 8 years. You still want more money for rail, and you still can't agree on how to pay for it. When you and I talked on the show 6 weeks ago about it, you said the president wanted major action by Memorial Day. So what's next? Is the White House going to make another counteroffer? What's the plan?
Yeah, so this week Congress is out of Washington, but it's very much going to be a work week for us and for the conversations that are ongoing with Congress. By the time that they return, which is June 7th, just a week from tomorrow, we need a clear direction. Certainly encouraging to see the healthy conversations that have happened over the last days and weeks. But the president keeps saying inaction is not an option, and time is not unlimited here. The American people expect us to do something. They expect us to deliver, and it's my hope that these continued conversations, really over these next few days, will be productive and will lead to that clear direction.
So there seems to be a disagreement between what President Biden and agreed to with Republican senators and what his staff is now saying. Key Republican negotiator, Senator Shelley Moore Capito, a Republican from West Virginia, she says, and other senators who are in the room with her agree, that President Biden suggested he's willing to settle around $1 trillion, and it didn't matter to him if it was $1 trillion over 5 years or $1 trillion over 8 years. Now, I understand the devil's in the details in terms of how to pay for it, the timeline, et cetera. As an overall principle, is that correct? President Biden is willing to accept a $1 trillion price tag, and it doesn't matter to him if it's over 5 or 8 years.
Well, the president's counteroffer was a $1.7 trillion package. And again, that represents coming off our original view by $500 billion. It is encouraging to see Republicans talking about getting to the neighborhood of $1 trillion. Of course, when you start trying to make it apples to apples, comparing what would have been spent anyway, looking at the categories, that's where the devil really is in the details. And those are the things that we're continuing to discuss with them. But I'll say, we've been in these discussions in good faith, and there have been really healthy negotiations of the kind that I think people were starting to wonder whether that's even possible in Washington anymore. This is exactly what happens in those negotiations. Do the categories line up? Do the numbers line up? Are we talking about the same thing? And can we get to an overlap? We're not there yet. There's definitely a lot of difference in our views, but it's been encouraging to see the movement.
So just to translate for folks out there who aren't staying up to speed on every single one of these details, when Secretary Buttigieg talks about the money that would have been spent otherwise, he's talking about infrastructure and transportation money that's just automatic in the budget. And the suggestion has been made by Democrats that the $1 trillion or almost $1 trillion counterproposal the Republicans have made over 8 years is really only a couple $100 billion more than what automatically would have been spent, right? I'm hearing you correctly. I believe that that's the correct assessment. So my question is, do you think...
Yeah, exactly.
Does that mean that they're negotiating in bad faith?
No, that's the thing. I mean, we've been very above board when we're in these conversations. The charts are out, the numbers are there, and obviously there are a lot of different ways to talk about the same thing. The fact that they philosophically seem to agree that trillion-dollar investments are the kind of thing we need to be doing right now, that's encouraging. But we aren't exactly aligned. In fact, there's a lot of daylight here, especially because things that we consider very important from making sure that we're sparking an electric vehicle revolution and that it happens in the U.S. with American workers on American soil, to the president's commitment to make sure that we get rid of 100% of lead pipes in this country. We didn't see as much of that in the counter proposal. But again, that's how a negotiation works. These are exactly the kinds of things we're talking through over the next few days. I just want to emphasize we really are talking about the next few days, because by the time Congress is back in Washington, I think those members of Congress and frankly the American people and all of us in the administration expect to have a clear direction.
So some Democratic lawmakers who, and I'm not just talking about the Bernie Sanders types who are very skeptical of Republicans to begin with, even though Sanders does have a record of bipartisan work, but some people who make a tradition of it, who normally cut deals, they say, you know what, Buttigieg, you've negotiated enough. The Republican counterproposal isn't much more than the U.S. would have spent anyway. You're wasting your time. Take a listen.
It's an old expression, fish or cut bait. I think we're getting to that moment.
We hope to move forward with Republicans, but we're not going to let them saying no stand in our way.
But at some point, we have to move forward.
Casey, Schumer, Durbin, these are people who generally would be in favor of negotiating. Are you basically saying that in the next week, if there isn't an agreement, Democrats are going to go it alone?
I think we are getting pretty close to a fish or cut bait moment, but I'll tell you that on the fishing side of things, the negotiations have been healthy. There's a lot of conversations going on among members of Congress who have come forward with a lot of different ideas, in addition to the discussions that we've had with the group led by Senator Capito. So we believe in this process, but also very much agree that this can't go on forever. The American people want results. We are 13th place in infrastructure as a country now, and probably headed the wrong direction. We are seeing losses to this day, not just things you count up in industry group reports of the millions that are lost when we have port backups, but just individual families paying hundreds of bucks a year in the so-called pothole tax, the invisible cost of wear and tear on our vehicles when roads aren't in good shape. This can't go on in terms of the condition of our infrastructure. Therefore, the negotiations can't go on forever either.
Before you go, Secretary, you're a veteran. You served as a naval intelligence officer in Afghanistan. I know that there is someone you're thinking about this Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah, I mean, for Memorial Day, when you served, of course, you think about people who didn't make it back from a deployment. Also thinking about people who came back seemingly whole from a deployment, who we lost years after they returned. And it's a reminder that you never know what somebody's up against, that mental health struggles are real and need to be addressed, and that it's never a bad time to check on somebody you served with or to check on somebody you cared about.
Absolutely. Secretary Buttigieg, thanks so much for your time. And of course, thanks for your service.
Thank you.